Surrender Starmer. That's the label the Prime Minister.
A political earthquake has just hit Britain, and its shockwaves are shaking every corner of Westminster. In a stunning, history-defining moment, the Supreme Court has turned against Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Chief Justice herself has spoken, and what she said has sent the political establishment into freefall. For the first time in modern British history, the highest judicial authority has not only exposed a sitting Prime Minister's financial secrets, but has issued a direct, public rebuke, urging him to step down. The scandal is staggering. £124,000 in unexplained income, £39,000 in luxury gifts, suspicious land sales, dubious tax loopholes, hidden perks from political donors, and perhaps most explosive of all, evidence that Starmer may have tried to use his position to silence political rivals like Reform UK. The judiciary has now declared this a crisis of democracy. Trust in leadership has collapsed. Starmer is no longer just embattled, he's being dragged toward political extinction. What began as whispers has become a constitutional reckoning, and the entire country is watching as Labour's carefully constructed facade begins to crumble. For decades, the line between politics and the judiciary in Britain has been sacred, untouched, respected, and rigid. But that line has now been shattered. In a move so unprecedented, it stunned legal scholars and politicians alike. Chief Justice Dame Sukar of the Supreme Court stood before the nation and issued a formal, unflinching condemnation of Keir Starmer. Her words were sharp, deliberate, and devastating. She accused the Prime Minister of systemic ethical failures and declared that his actions represent a direct threat to the democratic values upon which this country is founded. This is no ordinary political squabble. This is the United Kingdom's highest court, signalling that its Prime Minister may have violated not just public trust, but the very principles of constitutional integrity. The Chief Justice's statement laid out a damning list of grievances, centred around financial misconduct, misuse of power, and what she called deliberate efforts to suppress political opposition through institutional manipulation. At the heart of this legal earthquake is one word: accountability, and by the court's judgment, Keir Starmer has failed that test completely. Behind closed doors, tensions had been mounting for months. Insiders now reveal that multiple departments had grown deeply concerned about Starmer's opaque financial dealings. A string of audits, legal inquiries, and whistleblower reports had slowly painted a troubling picture. Yet the government kept dismissing the allegations as political noise. It was only when financial documents leaked to independent journalists showed gaping inconsistencies that the Supreme Court was forced to act. Among the most egregious discoveries was a £124,000 discrepancy in the declared sale value of Starmer's family property. Originally valued at over £400,000, the taxable gain was reported as just £275,739. The missing amount raised serious questions, and none of them have been answered. It wasn't just the property, it was the pattern. The Prime Minister's financial records showed a strange and troubling blend of personal expenses declared as professional costs, luxury items listed under office allowances, and gifts that were conveniently omitted from required disclosures. One donor in particular, Lord Wat Ali, emerged as a central figure in the investigation. Records show he lavished Starmer and his wife with over £39,000 worth of high-end goods. Exclusive handbags, custom-tailored suits, rare wines. None of this was declared until after intense media pressure. And even then, the Labour Party's official line was filled with evasions and vague justifications. The Chief Justice highlighted these financial irregularities not as isolated missteps, but as signs of systemic rot. According to her statement, Starmer's failure to disclose such gifts in a timely and transparent manner undermines the very notion of ethical governance. The judicial review also noted that Starmer attempted to label these personal perks as administrative or office-related expenses, an accounting trick that legal experts have equated to concealment. But what truly inflamed the judiciary's ire was not just the money, it was the abuse of political power. New documents, now made public as part of the inquiry, suggest that Starmer actively interfered with electoral reforms, designed to give smaller parties like Reform UK fairer access to televised debates and campaign funding. Leaked memos show his office pressured broadcasting regulators to block Reform UK appearances, using vague legal threats and references to public stability as justification. For a Prime Minister to meddle in such matters, according to the Chief Justice, represents a clear and dangerous breach of democratic norms. Now the backlash is overwhelming. Legal commentators have called this the most severe constitutional judgment in decades. The Supreme Court's declaration has forced Parliament into a state of emergency debate. MPs across the spectrum, including some within Labour's own ranks, have demanded Starmer resign immediately. Civil rights organisations are calling for a full criminal investigation. Protesters have flooded the streets in major cities. Public trust is evaporating by the hour. And what is Starmer's response? So far, deflection. He has issued a short statement denying wrongdoing, claiming that technical misunderstandings have been exaggerated for political gain. But few are buying it. Voters see through the spin. They see a leader caught in a web of lies, scrambling to escape a trap of his own making. And they're angry, furious that after years of being promised clean politics, they now face another scandal-tainted administration. In this new and dangerous chapter of British politics, the questions are piling up. How deep does this corruption go? Who else in Labour's top leadership knew about it? And can a Prime Minister, under formal judicial rebuke, still lead the country with legitimacy? With each passing hour, the answers grow darker, and the calls for accountability grow louder. What happens next may determine the fate of not just Keir Starmer, but the future of British democracy itself. As the judicial hammer slammed down on Keir Starmer, the financial skeletons hidden in the darkest corners of his political closet began tumbling out in full view. The £124,000 tax discrepancy wasn't an isolated issue. It was just the first crack in what now looks like a vast and carefully engineered scheme to deceive, conceal, and benefit from the very public office Starmer once claimed he would clean up. The deeper the investigators dig, the worse it gets. Forensic accountants working alongside the judiciary have now uncovered a trail of opaque offshore transactions, unreported donor perks, and suspicious real estate deals stretching back years, some of which, sources say, directly benefited Starmer's inner circle and even members of his own family. And the scale of the deception is jaw-dropping. One report reveals that Starmer received over £39,000 in luxury goods over a 24-month period, ranging from private flights and exclusive dining memberships to high-end gifts conveniently routed through third-party associates to avoid immediate disclosure. The gifts were neither denied nor addressed until pressed by court officers. And when confronted, Starmer reportedly claimed these items were on loan or tokens of goodwill, despite records showing they were kept, used, and in some cases registered to his personal address. But perhaps most chilling is how Starmer allegedly used his political machinery to suppress any potential exposure. Former Labour insiders, some of whom have now turned whistleblowers, describe a culture of secrecy, where uncomfortable questions were met with silences, threats, or firings. Several accounts detail how staff members who raised alarms about irregular filings or suspicious donors were reassigned or discredited. One senior aide claims he was told point blank by a Starmer ally, "You don't question the system, we are the system now." This toxic arrogance, now exposed to public view, has become the defining characteristic of Starmer's leadership style. The man who once promised to be Mr. Integrity has been revealed to be just another career politician drunk on power, playing by a different set of rules while preaching ethics to everyone else. The judicial review also highlighted how Starmer's personal accounts showed strange financial movements in and out of shell companies registered in Jersey and the Isle of Man, well-known tax havens used by the elite to shield wealth from public scrutiny. These offshore entities, though technically legal, raised alarm bells when matched against his public declarations. Starmer, who famously campaigned against Tory tax dodgers, now finds himself unable to explain how certain payments ended up routed through firms tied to foreign trusts. One payment in particular, a £52,000 consulting fee, was declared as legal consultation despite being paid during a period when Starmer was not practicing law. No legal records, no client details, no invoices. Just a wire transfer from a mysterious entity with links to a defence contractor seeking government approval. The court called it the most suspicious transaction yet discovered, and for good reason. It reeks of influence peddling at the highest level. The scandal doesn't stop with money. It stretches into appointments, backroom deals, and abuse of public institutions. Evidence has emerged that Starmer quietly promoted individuals connected to these financial networks into sensitive government posts, positions that gave them access to regulatory data, infrastructure contracts, and even public funds. One such appointee, a former lobbyist now working in the Cabinet Office, is allegedly under investigation for awarding contracts to firms with ties to Starmer's known donors. These are not coincidences. They are part of a clear pattern of political favouritism, insider access, and strategic concealment, shielded by Labour's centralised messaging machine and Starmer's relentless control over his party's internal structures. The media, once cautiously respectful of Starmer's Mr. Competent image, has now turned hostile. Tabloids are unleashing headline after headline, comparing Starmer to disgraced politicians of the past. Broadsheets are digging into the judicial findings, cross-referencing donation records, and raising disturbing new questions. Even traditionally Labour-friendly outlets have begun to break ranks. They know the public mood has shifted. Trust is gone, the people are angry, and for many, this is the final betrayal. Starmer's calm, controlled image, his softly spoken lectures on integrity, now come across as cold manipulation. The public sees not a steady hand, but a calculating operator, using legal grey areas and political power to quietly enrich himself while tightening his grip on authority. Public fury has reached boiling point. Outside Parliament, crowds are gathering, shouting for answers, demanding resignations. Social media is ablaze with fury. Had Starmer scandal and step down. Starmer are trending across all platforms. Thousands are now calling for a full criminal investigation, not just a judicial rebuke. Protesters outside the Supreme Court hold placards reading, "No one above the law and fraud" in a red tie. Even within Labour, cracks are showing. A handful of backbench MPs have now broken ranks, demanding that Starmer come clean or go. One anonymous MP was quoted saying, "This is worse than anything we accused Boris of. If we stay silent now, we are finished as a party." Meanwhile, Reform UK and other opposition parties are seizing the moment, demanding a full parliamentary inquiry. Nigel Farage has already called for snap elections, claiming the British people deserve a new mandate free from corruption. For a Prime Minister to be called out by the Supreme Court, accused of financial impropriety, and still refuse to resign is, in their words, a constitutional crisis in plain sight. And they're not wrong. The public is witnessing the slow-motion collapse of not just a leader, but of an entire political illusion that Labour has sold since Starmer's rise to power. What's collapsing now isn't just a financial house of cards. It's the moral credibility of a man who built his career on promises of integrity, and who may now be remembered as the very embodiment of betrayal. The air inside the Supreme Court was tense. Weeks of growing suspicion and murmurs of scandal had led to this historic moment. A sitting Prime Minister being dragged into court, not as a witness, not as a supporter of the rule of law, but as the accused. The court had heard enough. The evidence was no longer just circumstantial. It was damning, overwhelming, and too systemic to ignore. Then came the thunderclap. In a fiery and unprecedented statement, the Chief Justice delivered what legal commentators are already calling the most severe public rebuke of a Prime Minister in modern UK history. His words cut through the political fog like a sword. No individual, regardless of rank, privilege or title, is above the law, not even the Prime Minister. The court found that Keir Starmer's financial disclosures were incomplete, inconsistent, and in some cases deliberately misleading. The £124,000 in question wasn't just missing paperwork or clerical error. It was the tip of an iceberg showing sustained evasion, hidden transactions, and concealment from oversight bodies. The Supreme Court concluded that Starmer had knowingly and willfully failed to disclose material financial interests, which had significant implications for policy integrity and national governance. And the conclusion was chilling. This conduct undermines public confidence in democratic institutions and violates the standards expected of the holder of the highest political office in the land. The room fell silent. Even Starmer's legal team appeared visibly shaken. Their polished confidence had vanished. The Prime Minister, who had built a reputation for calculated calm, sat stiffly as the court delivered the most humiliating blow yet. And then came the most shocking part of all. The court formally recommended that Starmer step down pending further investigation. A suggestion so rare and politically explosive that seasoned court watchers gasped aloud. The UK's legal system, famed for its restraint, was now openly calling into question the Prime Minister's right to govern. It wasn't just a legal matter anymore, it was a national crisis. Within hours, the judgment was front-page news across every major outlet. The Times headlined, "Starmer must resign, Supreme Court unleashes fury." The Telegraph declared, "PM unfit for office, judiciary breaks silence." Even The Guardian, long considered a quiet supporter of Starmer's Labour, admitted the decision represented a staggering rebuke with implications far beyond party politics. It was the moment the dam broke. Members of Parliament, stunned by the gravity of the ruling, began turning on Starmer one by one. Labour frontbenchers went quiet. Whispers of leadership challenges filled Westminster's corridors. MPs who had stood behind him now avoided the cameras. The man once hailed as the grown-up in the room was now being treated like political toxic waste. Public reaction was fierce. Outside the court, the crowds erupted. Chants of resign now echoed across the city. Protesters waved Union Jacks and held banners demanding criminal prosecution. Legal experts flooded TV screens, explaining just how rare and serious the court's ruling was. One retired judge said bluntly, "If Starmer does not resign, he risks taking the entire credibility of our parliamentary system down with him." For many across the UK, this was no longer about left or right. It wasn't Labour versus Tory. It was a question of principle, of national decency. Can a man exposed in court, financially compromised, and politically disgraced still claim the moral authority to lead? But Starmer wasn't done. In a move that shocked even his own cabinet, he issued a defiant statement within hours of the ruling. He said he respected the court's process, but strongly disagreed with its conclusions and insisted he would remain in office to see through the work the country elected him to do. To many, it was a slap in the face, a man accused of breaking public trust now claiming to be its guardian. Social media erupted. #StarmerOut trended globally. Thousands began signing petitions calling for his resignation. The opposition called for an emergency parliamentary session, but Starmer doubled down, surrounding himself with loyalists and dismissing the verdict as politically motivated. That line, many say, may become the final nail in his political coffin. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Members of the judiciary, quietly furious at Starmer's tone, reportedly contacted constitutional authorities, warning of a potential standoff between the courts and the executive. Legal scholars began discussing the unthinkable, whether the monarchy, through the royal prerogative, could be asked to intervene if a prime minister openly defies the courts. The crisis had now gone from financial scandal to constitutional flashpoint. The balance of power was under threat. The world watched as Britain's democracy faced a dangerous test. Would it bend to political manipulation or stand firm in the face of lawlessness cloaked in power? The Labour Party itself began to fracture. Anonymous sources from the party's National Executive Committee admitted they were deeply alarmed and considering emergency procedures. Some even floated the idea of suspending Starmer's membership, pending a party inquiry, an unthinkable scenario just weeks ago. But it wasn't just party insiders. Grassroots members, trade union backers, and even long-time Labour voters began speaking out. In town halls and local meetings, the message was clear. We didn't vote for this. We were promised integrity, and we got corruption. He has to go. And amidst all this, Reform UK surged. Nigel Farage called the ruling a victory for truth and said Starmer belongs in a courtroom, not Downing Street. The public, disillusioned by betrayal, began flocking to alternatives. Polls showed a massive collapse in Labour's lead. In some regions, Reform UK overtook the Tories as the primary challenger. A general election suddenly seemed inevitable. What began as a quiet murmur about undisclosed money had exploded into a full-blown national reckoning. The judiciary had spoken, the people had risen. And the Prime Minister? He was cornered by the truth, by the law, and by the very promise of justice he once used as his political brand. As the dust settles, what remains of Keir Starmer's leadership is nothing more than a fragile, flickering illusion. The Prime Minister who once promised honest politics, who told the nation he would be the antidote to years of scandal, now stands exposed as part of the very rot he swore to clean up. The £124,000 in undisclosed income, the £39,000 in luxury gifts, the Supreme Court's damning ruling, the furious calls for resignation. It all paints a picture of a man who climbed the ladder of justice, only to kick it away the moment he reached the top. The ruling wasn't vague, it wasn't subtle. It was a thunderous declaration from the UK's highest court. Starmer violated public trust, evaded transparency, and abused the office of Prime Minister. And yet, he clings to power with the desperation of a man who knows what comes next if he lets go. Criminal investigations have already begun circling. The Crown Prosecution Service is reportedly examining evidence passed on by the court. Investigative journalists are preparing to release even more damaging details about Starmer's financial ties, foreign donors, and secret meetings hidden from public view. His allies are jumping ship. His party is in chaos. The nation is demanding justice. What's more disturbing is how Starmer reacted, not with humility, not with an apology, but with arrogance. He dismissed the ruling, he insulted the court, he called it politically motivated. That wasn't just reckless, it was dangerous. For a Prime Minister to challenge the independence of the judiciary is to walk a line few dare to cross. It's the language of tyrants, not statesmen. It sends a chilling message to every citizen that the law only matters when it's convenient to those in power. Parliament now faces an unprecedented decision. Do they allow a disgraced Prime Minister to remain in office after the most scathing legal rebuke in modern British history? Or do they act swiftly and decisively to preserve the dignity of our democratic institutions? Cross-party talks are underway. Emergency motions are being prepared. Even Labour's most loyal MPs are privately acknowledging what must be done. It's over, one senior Labour official reportedly said. He just doesn't know it yet. Meanwhile, the people are not waiting. Outside Westminster, protesters have turned up in record numbers. Ordinary citizens, young and old, left and right, are demanding one thing: accountability. This isn't just about Starmer anymore. This is about whether power can exist without consequence, whether those who govern us are truly answerable to the law. The British public have had enough of lies wrapped in suits, of integrity promised and betrayal delivered. And what of Reform UK? What of Nigel Farage? With every hour they grow stronger. Their message that Britain needs a political reset is suddenly not just appealing, but urgent. In poll after poll, Labour's support has collapsed. In working-class heartlands once painted red, voters now whisper of betrayal, of broken promises, of seeking something, anything, better. The next election, whether it comes in weeks or months, could rewrite Britain's political history forever. So here we are, a Prime Minister disgraced, a party in freefall, a court system tested but unbroken, and a nation once again asking itself the hard questions. This scandal has revealed not just the cracks in one man's reputation, but the fragility of the system that allowed him to rise unchecked. We are living through history, not the kind that inspires pride, but the kind that demands action. Do you still believe Keir Starmer is fit to lead this country? Do you trust a man who ignored the courts, hid his wealth, and refused to resign? Or is it finally time for Britain to clean house, for good? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The battle has begun. Whose side are you on? Thank you.